We all know how the story ends. All of America's top federal authorities find no evidence of collusion or conspiracy. There was no client list, no blackmail, nothing left behind at all. The mysterious banker who managed money of billionaires that didn't even exist, while trafficking girls to and from a private island in the Caribbean, at the same time as he hosted some of the world's most famous politicians, businessmen, intellectuals, and celebrities as house guests, he had acted completely alone. It was all an unfortunate coincidence and nothing more, unless we look at the mountain of indications that he was a key link in an intelligence network that blackmailed the world's most powerful people on behalf of a small but influential country in the Middle East. What sounds like a laughable conspiracy theory becomes very serious if you dig deep into Epstein's life, his mysterious fortune, unexplainable immunity from prosecution, leaked emails and victim statements that paint a very clear picture. While our government pretends there are no questions to answer, their silence doesn't make them go away. It only makes the questions grow louder. So to answer to President Trump,
are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
Yes, we still talk about Jeffrey Epstein.
I believe that he was a Mossad access agent. It makes perfect sense to me.
It became basically an intelligence operation to entrap different politicians around.
I think it's more about protecting the Israelis, actually.
I never had the privilege of going to his island.
Is it true, sir, that you have what's been described as an egg-shaped penis?
In order to understand how Jeffrey Epstein was created, we have to go back, long before the island, before his wealth, before the flight logs, before the world knew his name, and the unpleasant fact that he had an egg-shaped penis. Back to the very beginning and look closely at the people, the money, and the intelligence machinery that built him. Jeffrey Epstein was born in Brooklyn in 1953 to a working-class Jewish family. As a gifted math prodigy, he dropped out of college in 1974, but somehow landed a teaching job at one of New York's most elite private schools. Despite having no degree and no formal teaching credentials, Epstein was hired to teach math and physics at the Dalton School, a pipeline for Manhattan's wealthiest families. The headmaster who hired him after a brief meeting was Donald Barr, a former OSS intelligence officer, the precursor to the CIA. Donald Barr was also a novelist. His 1973 science fiction book, Space Relations, describes an interplanetary society ruled by ultra-wealthy oligarchs who get corrupted by their power and their wealth to the point where they're basically insane and extremely perverted. And they spend most of their time breeding young slaves and kidnapping teenage girls from around the universe to bring them home and use them as sex slaves. A disturbing narrative that, in hindsight, feels eerily prophetic. Decades later, Donald's son, William Barr, would become U.S. Attorney General under President Donald Trump and oversee the Department of Justice during Epstein's death in federal custody in 2019. The official ruling under his DOJ was suicide, a conclusion that has been met with widespread skepticism. Dalton was Epstein's first network node, the elite social lattice that gave him proximity to New York's money class and the world of hidden influence. And it was the first of many anomalies, how a college dropout at the age of 21 lands a teaching job at one of the most elite private schools. Eventually, Epstein became acquainted with Alan Greenberg, the legendary CEO of Bear Stearns, whose son and daughter were attending the school. In June 1976, after Epstein was dismissed from Dalton for poor performance, Greenberg offered him a job at Bear Stearns. He was known for hiring people he called PSD candidates, poor, smart, and desperate. Epstein fit the description perfectly. He left academia behind and joined Wall Street, quickly developing a reputation not merely as an investment manager, but as a financial problem solver for the ultra-connected. He became what insiders described as a fixer, someone who could move money quietly, manage offshore accounts, and make legal or financial problems disappear. His value lay in access and discretion, the twin currencies of the shadow elite. Once inside the bank, Epstein's rise was inexplicably fast. He shot from a junior assistant to limited partner in just 4 years, an almost unheard of ascent for someone with no degree and no formal background in finance. Then just as quickly, his career imploded. In 1981, a scandal broke. The SEC opened an investigation regarding insider trading at Bear Stearns, and he resigned under the pretense of policy violations. Yet, by then, he had already mastered what mattered most: how to move money unseen and how to walk away untouched. He then founded Intercontinental Assets Group in 1981, a financial recovery consultancy. His first major client was none other than Adnan Khashoggi, who at that time was the world's most famous arms broker and a key intermediary between the U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia in covert weapons sales. During the Reagan years, the United States secretly sold weapons through Israel to Iran and funneled the profits to the Nicaraguan Contras, disguising the entire operation through a maze of offshore fronts. When Congress later investigated the scandal, these financial infrastructures were dismantled. A covert banking network of intelligence agencies and their billionaire allies, forming a black market economy, money that serves state objectives but exists entirely outside official accounting. Even though there is no public evidence proving that Jeffrey Epstein directly participated in Iran-Contra arms deals, his activities, clients, and timing place him on the periphery of that same covert finance ecosystem. Epstein enters this world at the exact moment the network needed deniable financiers. Some journalists and researchers argue that similar offshore networks that laundered weapons money in the 80s were later used for blackmail and influence operations. According to them, Epstein didn't invent that system. He inherited it. This is a second, very strange anomaly: how a 28-year-old college dropout with no military, political, or intelligence background gets Adnan Khashoggi, the world's most famous arms broker, as a client, and orbiting in the Middle Eastern arms trade circuit, one of the most secretive and government-controlled markets on Earth. For some reasons, when investigators later looked at Epstein's fortune, his ties to Khashoggi's arms finance ecosystem were completely ignored. The British arms dealer Douglas Leese, who introduced Epstein to Khashoggi, now introduced him to Stephen Hoffenberg in 1987 as a brilliant but morally flexible financier. The guy's a genius. He's great at selling securities, and he has no moral compass. Epstein worked for Hoffenberg's firm, Towers Financial Corporation, as a strategist. The Wall Street firm was later exposed as a $460 million Ponzi scheme. Roughly $100 million was siphoned offshore that were never recovered. It is speculated that Epstein moved that money through the same offshore channels used by intelligence-linked financiers and arms dealers to shield it from authorities and investors. Then, Epstein secretly cooperated with U.S. prosecutors and investigators during the Towers investigation, providing at least 3 interviews that implicated Hoffenberg and others. This cooperation likely explains why Epstein avoided charges despite being described as the scheme's mastermind by Hoffenberg and prosecutors. Sources indicate the case against Epstein would have been far worse had it gone to trial, but his assistants shielded him. After Tower collapsed and Hoffenberg went to prison for 18 years, Epstein was never charged and emerged wealthier and more connected than ever. Did Epstein prove his value as a fixer to powerful interests? And was that one of the reasons why he became effectively immune from law enforcement scrutiny afterward? Up until this point, Epstein's life reads less like a resume and more like a series of glitches in the Matrix. Every stage of his ascent defies normal logic. From college dropout to elite Manhattan teacher, to one of the most prestigious investment banks in the world. Within 4 years, he experiences a rocket rise to limited partner, then gets caught in the blast radius of an SEC insider trading investigation, and somehow walks away with no charges, while others aren't so lucky. Then he resurfaces at Towers Financial, one of the largest Ponzi schemes in American history. And again, when the whole operation collapses, Epstein walks away unharmed. Around the same time, he begins working with arms dealers connected to the CIA and Mossad, acquires a fake passport, and moves through the Middle East like a man with invisible clearance. At every turn, he falls upward. At every scandal, the trapdoor opens beneath him, and he lands on a cushioned platform. At every crime, someone else takes the fall. No normal person has a life trajectory like this. But that was just the beginning. During this time in the 1980s, Epstein was also introduced to the British media mogul Robert Maxwell, father of Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's future partner and recruiter. Robert Maxwell was a Czech-born British media tycoon, the powerful owner of Mirror Group newspapers, and a man with deep political connections across the Western world. Former Israeli intelligence officer Ari Ben-Menashe has long claimed that Maxwell had served Mossad, assisting in arms deals and in the Promise software, a powerful U.S.-developed database system originally designed for law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Working in cooperation with Israeli intelligence, Maxwell helped distribute a modified version of the software to foreign governments, including Iran, one embedded with a secret backdoor that allowed Mossad to spy on its users worldwide. By the early 1990s, Maxwell's empire was collapsing under the weight of mounting debt and missing funds. To maintain the illusion of solvency, he looted hundreds of millions from the Mirror Group's employee pension funds, a crime that would only come to light after his death. On November 5, 1991, Maxwell was found dead, floating beside his yacht, Lady Ghislaine, off the Canary Islands. Officially ruled an accident, some speculate that he allegedly demanded hundreds of millions from Mossad to fill the gap and threatened to expose secrets if refused. Yet this theory remains unproven speculation. UK government files, declassified in 2021, describe Maxwell as a suspected spy with possible links to MI6, KGB, and Mossad. A CIA assessment, reported in 1992 and later via the Freedom of Information Act, concluded he cooperated informally with Israeli intelligence. Officially, according to Mossad, Robert Maxwell obviously did not work for Mossad. But picture this. After his death, Maxwell received a state funeral in Israel and was buried with full honors on the Mount of Olives, a resting place usually reserved for Israel's national heroes, an unprecedented privilege for a non-Israeli citizen. The state funeral was attended by 6 current and former heads of Mossad. Then Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir and former Prime Minister Shimon Peres both said at the ceremony that this man has done more for the state of Israel than can now be told. You don't get this kind of state funeral for publishing newspapers. According to Ben-Menashe, it was Robert Maxwell who introduced Epstein and Ghislaine in the 1980s, placing them together for what he described as an Israeli honey trap operation, a sexual blackmail network meant to compromise powerful foreign figures. Officially, however, Epstein and Ghislaine's relationship began years later, after Robert Maxwell's death in 1991. Public accounts, corroborated by social and press records, show that Ghislaine moved to New York in 1992, devastated by her father's sudden death and the collapse of his business empire. It was there, within Manhattan's elite social scene, that she was formally introduced to Epstein, and the two soon became inseparable. In the mid-1980s, Epstein was also introduced to Leslie Wexner through mutual contacts in high finance. And Wexner can't be described as anything but a very strange man. He described himself as being driven by a dybbuk, a demon of compulsion that pushed him to accumulate money, power, and control without end. I feel possessed by a demon that drives me to make money. He micromanaged everything, built an isolated mansion with secret passages, and bought up surrounding properties so no one could live near him. Friends and colleagues said he was emotionally distant, spiritually unsettled, and impossible to truly know. Stephen Hoffenberg later claimed that he helped connect Epstein to Wexner as part of a fundraising effort for Wexner's expansion of The Limited and its spin-off, Victoria's Secret. The nature of their relationship is still a mystery, because it's very hard to draw a logical story. Just a few years after the two met, Wexner granted Epstein power of attorney, effectively giving him legal control over his finances, property, and signatures, an extraordinary level of trust rarely seen outside family relationships. Several of Les Wexner's employees warned him that Jeffrey Epstein was bringing underage girls to his New Albany estate and abusing them on the property. Security staff and household workers reported the behavior directly to Wexner's office, describing suspicious auditions and massages. Despite these warnings, Wexner took no action. Epstein kept full access to the estate, retained power of attorney, and continued managing Wexner's finances. Wexner even gifted Epstein his East 71st Street townhouse, a lavish mansion that became the central hub for Epstein's trafficking and influence operation, equipped with hidden cameras, private rooms, and a guest list that mixed billionaires, royals, and scientists. Les Wexner's vast philanthropic empire revolved around Jewish education and staunchly pro-Israel causes. At its heart was an elite leadership study group that overlapped heavily with what journalists later dubbed the Mega Group, a tight-knit circle of Jewish billionaires who poured hundreds of millions into pro-Israel advocacy and maintained unusually close ties to both American and Israeli intelligence figures. The Mega Group was co-founded in 1991 by Les Wexner and Charles Bronfman, a Canadian liquor heir and longtime business partner of Robert Maxwell. He helped launch the group that would become infamous for quietly coordinating massive political donations on behalf of Israel. Membership was invitation-only and staggeringly wealthy. Among the members were Steven Spielberg, hedge fund titan Michael Steinhardt, and cosmetics mogul Ronald Lauder, president of the World Jewish Congress, who has been one of Benjamin Netanyahu's biggest financial backers, funneling millions to his Likud party over the years. Lauder was a longtime friend and associate of Alan Greenberg. Even though not a formal member, Greenberg orbited in the same circle, viewed his philanthropy as a Jewish tax, and dedicated roughly half of his charitable to support Israeli causes. In 2008, Wexner appeared alongside George W. Bush at Israel's 60th anniversary celebration, symbolic of the high-level access Epstein's orbit provided. Long before the world learned that Epstein was a sex trafficker, his social circle already knew he had an obsession with very young women, and they treated it as a joke, not a warning. Donald Trump remarked in 2002, "Jeffrey likes beautiful women as much as I do. Many of them are on the younger side." Woody Allen once joked in a birthday card that Epstein was a vampire, with a harem of young female vampires roaming his mansion. Scientists who visited his island said he would interrupt intellectual discussions with lines like, "What does that have to do with pussy?" His fixation on youth was open, obvious, and woven into his public persona. In 2002, when Vanity Fair journalist Vicky Ward began investigating Epstein for what was meant to be a glossy, semi-critical profile, two sisters came forward and stated that Epstein had sexually assaulted them in the 1990s, one of them underage at the time. In late August 1996, the older sister Maria filed a formal complaint with the New York Police Department detailing the groping and explicit images of minors she had seen in Epstein's safe. The NYPD took a report on, but declined to investigate the assault due to lack of jurisdiction, instead referring Maria to the FBI and providing their contact number. Maria called the FBI's New York field office at least twice that year. During one call, she spoke with an agent for about 30 minutes, describing Epstein's scheme and Maxwell's role in procuring girls, but received no clear next steps and was told she'd need to contact authorities in Ohio or New Mexico herself, where the assault had taken place, which she attempted, but with no progress. On another call, an agent abruptly hung up mid-sentence with no follow-up. The FBI never acknowledged her reports at the time and opened no investigation, allowing Epstein's abuse to continue unchecked for nearly a decade. Maria stated in later interviews that Epstein's entire network was run by Jewish supremacists and that the operation was led by the mega group. They would call us goyim and say we were cattle. It was all about superiority. Epstein and Maxwell would laugh about how easy it was to control the goyim with this operation. It was all run by a bunch of Jewish supremacists. They would say horrific things about Gentiles. It was all about Zionism and blackmail. They wanted control. Epstein then began showing up at the Vanity Fair office, lobbying aggressively to have the allegations removed. And then things turned sinister. The magazine's editor, Graydon Carter, found a bullet in the severed head of a dead cat placed on the steps outside his home. Ward became so frightened, she hired private security to guard her premature newborn babies in the neonatal intensive care unit, fearing Epstein might retaliate against them. When the article finally ran, all allegations of sexual abuse were deleted. Once again, Epstein won. And a decade later, we would discover that the sisters' accusations were only a tiny glimpse of the real operation. In March of 2005, an anonymous woman contacts the Palm Beach Police Department and claims that her 14-year-old stepdaughter had been paid to strip and massage Epstein. As it turned out, Jeffrey Epstein's Palm Beach mansion operated as a systematic hub for sexual abuse, where Ghislaine Maxwell served as the primary recruiter and handler. She targeted vulnerable girls with promises of massage work at the property, typically aged 13 to 17. Victims were encouraged to bring friends, forming a pyramid-like structure of exploitation. Police investigations later uncovered hundreds of nude photos and phone records connecting dozens of girls to the house. The local police spent over a year building a case on him completely undercover. Palm Beach Police Chief Michael Rader pursued it aggressively as a major sex crime case, with detectives identifying over 30 victims. Evidence was robust. Victim statements describing intimidation and grooming tactics, detailed cash payments, physical items seized from the mansion, and corroborating accounts from household employees. But just as local authorities prepared to indict Epstein, the case was abruptly taken away from them and transferred to federal jurisdiction under the FBI. A Florida grand jury, overseen by a special prosecutor, only heard from 2 of the many known victims, both minors, and still returned a single charge of adult pandering, even though nearly every identified victim was underage. Ryder, frustrated, appealed directly to the Department of Justice, but his requests for support were met with silence. Behind the scenes, U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta was secretly negotiating a non-prosecution agreement with Epstein's powerful legal team, including Alan Dershowitz and Ken Starr. The deal, sealed from public view, violated federal law in form of the Crime Victims' Rights Act by keeping the victims uninformed and unable to contest it. It granted Epstein immunity from federal prosecution and extended blanket immunity to all of his co-conspirators, both named and unnamed. A 2007 email from Assistant U.S. Attorney Villafana to Epstein's defense lawyers states, "I would prefer not to highlight for the judge all of the crimes and all of the other persons that we could charge." This demonstrates intent to minimize disclosure to the judge during sentencing to avoid scrutiny, aligning with efforts to keep the plea deal quiet. Only 2 people in the U.S. government could have authorized a federal prosecutor like Acosta to stand down: the Attorney General at the time, Alberto Gonzales, or the President George W. Bush. Investigative journalist Vicky Ward reported in July 2019 that a former senior White House official recounted that Acosta said during his 2017 Trump transition vetting for Labor Secretary that he was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. That's what Alex Acosta said in response.
So there has been reporting to that effect. And let me say, there's been reporting to a lot of effects in this case. not just now, but over the years. And again, I would hesitate to take this reporting as fact. This was a case that was brought by our office. It was brought based on the facts. And I look at that reporting and others. I can't address it directly because of our guidelines. But I can tell you that a lot of reporting is just going down rabbit holes. A few more questions.
That is not a denial. If he wasn't told that Epstein belonged to intelligence, why wouldn't he simply say no? He later testified under oath that he had no knowledge that Epstein was an intelligence asset. This, however, is a question of legal terms. Having knowledge is vague to the extent if he has direct knowledge or circumstantial knowledge are heard from someone else. Someone telling you is not knowledge. If someone tells you that he committed a crime, and you're asked if you had knowledge that he committed a crime, your lawyers will most likely tell you to answer no. The negotiations led to the lenient 2007 sweetheart deal. Epstein pleaded guilty only to minor state charges of solicitation of prostitution with a minor. He served just 13 months in county jail with an entire private wing for himself. After about 3.5 months, Epstein was permitted to leave the facility for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, under the guise of work release. This deal is by all potential standards a joke. From over 30 underage victims, documented interstate trafficking, which would be a potential life sentence, to a plea framing the crimes as involving 2 prostitutes, not trafficking victims. Victims were still kept in the dark, still in violation of federal law, as the agreement was negotiated secretly. Granting immunity to all potential co-conspirators, including Maxwell and unnamed others, makes it even more baffling. For the following 10 years, Epstein was a free man. After a minor setback, the operation continued. But then came the downfall that set off an avalanche that brought Epstein's crimes to the attention of the general public. And the real truth behind Epstein became increasingly clear.
Billionaire Jeffrey Epstein has been arrested on new sex trafficking charges. A source tells CBS 4 federal agents took him into custody yesterday at a New Jersey airport.
In July 2019, federal agents arrested Epstein on sex trafficking charges. The Manhattan townhouse yielded thousands of explicit photos, including apparent minors, hidden safe with cash and diamonds, and a fake Austrian passport under a pseudonym listing a Saudi address. His lawyers argued he carried it due to fear of anti-Semitic attacks. One of the driving forces for the arrest was one of Epstein's victims, Virginia Giuffre. She was a major catalyst for other Epstein victims to come forward, speak publicly, and file lawsuits. Her actions created a domino effect that empowered dozens of survivors. Virginia Giuffre publicly stated that she would never commit suicide. In a 2019 tweet, she wrote, "I am making it publicly known that in no way, shape, or form am I suicidal," adding that too many evil people want to see me quieted, and urging people to hold others accountable if anything happened to her. In 2025, months before the release of her personal memoirs, she died in Western Australia on April the 25th, 2025, at the age of 41. The official cause, suicide. That's what her father says about it.
It's impossible. And then for them to say that she committed suicide, there's no way that she did. Somebody got to her.
A lot of people evidently had good reasons to get her finally silenced. Luckily, posthumously, her memoirs were published. In her, she described how Maxwell trafficked her at the age of 17 to Andrew for sex in London, New York, and on Epstein's Little St. James Island. She recalls Andrew's sweaty demeanor during the London incident and his insistence on photos, famously with Maxwell, joking her mother would never forgive her for not posing. In a BBC interview, Prince Andrew dismissed these claims with the argument that he wasn't able to sweat due to a medical condition at the time, and admitted that his overall judgment of Epstein was colored by his tendency to be too honorable. We should feel really sorry for that guy. Despite being completely innocent, he was expelled from the British royal family and lost his royal titles, honors, and privileges. Giuffre also writes that she first met a prime minister on Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands sometime in 2002, when she was just 18. She was ordered to escort him to a cabana, but the man made it clear as soon as they were alone that he wanted violence. She describes perverse brutality of the worst kind, leaving the cabana bleeding from all 3 orifices. She immediately rushed to Epstein and begged him on her knees not to send her back to the prime minister. Epstein answered coldly, "You'll get that sometimes." The unnamed prime minister most likely refers to Ehud Barak, former Israeli prime minister and ex-intelligence chief. He visited Epstein over 30 times between 2013 and 2017. He was photographed entering the townhouse with young women present, and public filings show roughly $2.3 million in payments from Epstein-linked entities into Barak-connected Israeli tech ventures, including surveillance disciplines. Leaked emails suggest Jeffrey Epstein helped Barak broker a secretive security and intelligence cooperation deal with Mongolia between 2013 and 2016. Epstein acted as a fixer and financier, arranging meetings, advisory boards, and defense tech proposals, while Barak pursued Israeli military and cyber surveillance contracts. They also indicate that Epstein helped him to establish a secret back channel between Israel and Russia during the Syrian civil war. The goal was to coordinate a political transition that would remove Bashar al-Assad while securing Israeli strategic interests. Once again, the revelations portray Epstein as more than a financier, a covert intermediary operating within high-level geopolitical diplomacy. But that's not all. Another groundbreaking revelation is that Yoni Koren, a lieutenant colonel in Israel's military intelligence and longtime senior aide to former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, used Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan apartment as a base during multiple U.S. visits between 2013 and 2015. Epstein's personal calendars, released by the U.S. House Oversight Committee, document 3 stays. During the last 2 visits, Koren had retired from active duty but continued facilitating high-level meetings between U.S. and Israeli officials, including arranging Barak's access to former CIA Director Leon Panetta in a 2015 White House and Pentagon tour. Koren's career included joint covert operations with Mossad, and his use of Epstein's property alongside Epstein's role in Israeli security deals and back-channel diplomacy positions Epstein as a discrete logistical and access asset for Israeli intelligence figures, even if not a formal agent. Koren died in 2023. Barak has not commented on the leaked communications. This brings us to today. And as the story couldn't get any more suspicious, we are convinced of the opposite. Before and in Trump's second term, the administration hyped a review of Epstein files, promising revelations. But what happened afterwards can't be described as anything but a huge cover-up. But let's let the absolutely non-corrupt, law-abiding people in power speak for themselves.
On day 1, roll out the black book.
Right. The
Epstein black book, like on day 1.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
Seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. That is an important thing.
Absolutely, Senator. Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. There are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims. 200. They're reviewing, there are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn.
Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself?
Himself. There is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday.
These files were made up by Comey They were made up by Obama. They were made up by the Biden information,
Look, the whole thing is a hoax. It's put out by the Democrats.
In July 2025, a Justice Department memo concluded that no client list existed, no blackmail evidence was found, and Epstein's death was suicide. I think I don't have to highlight the absurdity of this conclusion. So the main question is still unanswered. On whose behalf did Epstein run his blackmail ring? Let's get to the bottom of this. Coming up with conspiracy theories is easy. Connecting several dots and creating a narrative based on these dots is a simple exercise. While many conspiracy theories also turn out not to be true, in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, it is evidently clear that we tripped over a thing. What we have to do is responsible conspiracy theorizing. After Operation Mockingbird or Operation MKUltra, that were large-scale operations with immense magnitude, that are now proven to be true, not to believe in conspiracies is not just naive, it is an idiocy. Every non-compromised figure with the minimum amount of morality would launch in regards to Epstein one of the biggest, most transparent investigations in American history. Why does this not happen? Or to put it with the words of J.D. Vance from 2021, what possible interest would the U.S. government have in keeping Epstein's clients secret? A plausible answer is that the intelligence community, domestic and/or foreign, compromised most of the figures that could make this decision, either through the Epstein operation or through other intelligence operations we don't even know exist. If we look at the limited information we have about Epstein, it is very evident that this intelligence agency is most likely Mossad. Let's recap. Former Israeli intelligence officer Ari Ben-Menashe said Epstein ran a Mossad honeypot operation after being recruited by Mossad spy Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's partner in crime. Maxwell's business partner was Charles Bronfman, a co-founder of the Mega Group, an exclusive club of Jewish billionaires funding pro-Israel causes. Co-founder Les Wexner gave Epstein his $77 million Manhattan townhouse, which was used as a central hub of his blackmail ring and granted him power of attorney. Wexner was Epstein's later only known client and the apparent source of his wealth. Maria Farmer, the first victim to report Epstein, said his entire network was run by Jewish supremacists who racially abused her and that the operation was led by the Mega Group. Mega Group member Ronald Lauder is president of the World Jewish Congress and a major donor to Netanyahu's Likud party. Epstein's lawyer and longtime friend, Alan Dershowitz, is a staunch Zionist, author of The Case for Israel, and was even considered to represent Israel at the International Court of Justice. Epstein had multiple meetings with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak in his New York apartment and hosted Israel's military intelligence officer Yoni Koren several times. Epstein and Barak were business partners in a tech company, staffed entirely by ex-Israeli intelligence operatives. Barak says he was first introduced to Epstein by ex-Israeli PM Shimon Peres, who also gave the eulogy at Robert Maxwell's funeral. Wexner's foundation paid Barak $2 million in 2004 for undisclosed research. Multiple people over the years, journalists, friends, and business partners recalled Epstein suggesting or hinting that he worked for an intelligence agency. Based on this, many argue that the pattern is undeniable. Epstein's blackmail operation was an Israeli intelligence asset, backed by powerful Zionist figures with deep ties to the Israeli government. And this video is just the tip of the iceberg. The deeper you go down this rabbit hole, the more complex, stranger, but also unverifiable it gets. If truly innocent, one way to clear Israel's name would be to launch an investigation of biblical proportions. However, with time we can hope that the whole truth will come to light, whatever this truth is. We are all fallible, and because of that, we all need a place in our mind open to the possibility that we are wrong. This goes both ways. Guilt by association, or pointing to a single cause, especially with regard to the complex network in which Epstein operated, are potential fallacies that we have to be aware of. Yet at the same time, It is irresponsible to turn a blind eye to very strong links that point to the conclusion that Epstein was an Israeli intelligence asset with significant influence, even long after his death. Fairly ironically, I'll leave this video with a quote from Ben Shapiro. Turning a blind eye to evil, however, doesn't make it disappear. It allows it to grow. And those who allow evil to grow in order to protect their own convenience will be held accountable for the end results of the evil they facilitate.